Dear friend, we are going to launch this plug talk. I think we are live now. So on behalf of Made in Africa, I'm very happy to moderate this plug talk together with Angelina Siaka. We are going to address a very important topic today with a very diverse panel. And this topic is agricultural transitions. It is the first round of discussion. We will follow this plug talk to two other plug talk in the coming weeks. Agricultural transition address today many challenges, economic, in finance, social, environmental. And to address those challenges, agricultural transition proposes new model of productions based on inclusive understanding and global interaction between animal, vegetal, and human. So a global understanding and a global interactions in our ecosystem. Agroecology in these challenges offer new model based on a very low environmental impact, with in mind time by time to be even an agriculture that can be regenerative for our ecosystem. And that's a fantastic challenge. And to guarantee food security, which is simply to offer and to produce healthy food for all of us. It is all about resilience. And we are very happy today to have a panel of speakers coming from international organizations, institutions, NGO, economic actors, but also coming from regulations to see from your perspective in Africa, in your context, what is the challenges of agricultural transitions and how can we foster the impact of these major challenges. To discuss so, I'm going to moderate that with Angelina Siaka from Made in Africa. She's our project manager for all of this plug talk. And we will have three parts. The first one will be a short presentation of all our speakers and to address also their point of view on agroecology and food security, on agricultural transitions. Then on the second part session, we are going to discuss of the impact of climate change and building a smart agriculture. And it is very interesting also to be able to look how climate change impact on agriculture. But if you take, if we integrate the new model of agroecology, how agriculture will impact also positively in climate change. And then the last part will help us to better understanding new financing model, new economic model, new innovation, new technology that are available to assist these agricultural transitions that can be mutualized and that can help to increase these major transitions. So first of all, thanks a lot to all of you. It's going to be very simple. When you please keep your mic mute. When you will give you the floor, just open your mic, unmute your mic, and make your presentation. Try to be straight to the point. If on the audience you have questions, please raise your questions. That's going to be through the message, and we will pass it to the speaker. And enjoy the talk. So Angelina, please, I give you the floor to launch this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Yann. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on the part of the world you're coming from, depending on the part of Africa you're coming from. So I propose you to open the dialogue, starting with a short introduction of each speakers, presenting your organization and its role. And depending on your field of expertise, I also suggest that you highlight from your own perspective the challenges, the challenging of the agricultural transition is facing, particularly toward agroecology and food security. Who would be the first? David, who would like to start? You have around 2 minutes.
Thank you, Angeline, for the opportunity. Good morning to you all. My name is David Michael. I work for Global Initiative for Food Security and Ecosystem Preservation is a non-profit organization based in Nigeria. We work with rural farmers, mobilizing them to build climate resilience, to improve food security. We work especially with the rural women. Food security in Africa, as you know, at the moment, Africa has a population of 1.2 billion people. It's projected that this population will grow to 2.5 billion by 2050. So if at 1.4, we are not able to feed ourselves, as COVID-19 has exposed us so, because many of you will know that during the lockdown period, most countries were forced to open up because they simply couldn't feed the people. And now this population is growing to 2.4 billion. How can we really feed the people in the face of climate change, in the face of land degradation, in the face of many youths and other young population running away from agriculture? So it's a huge issue. It's a huge issue for the continent, but it's not an issue that we cannot overcome if we take the right steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. We would like to follow. Sarah, would you like to follow?
Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of those who have plugged in, so to speak, to this conversation. I just want to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. My name's Sarah Mbagogulu. I'm the Regional Director for the International Fund for Agricultural Development for East and Southern Africa. I am based in Rome, Italy. The International Fund for Agricultural Development is an international aid with a very unique mandate to support a rural transformation and the transformation of rural spaces, both on farm and off farm. We have a dual mandate for sovereign finance, so we work very closely with partner governments, member states. At the same time, we work with also a number of wider stakeholders. Our unique mandate really focuses on agriculture and sustainability. And so we really believe that sustainability is at the heart of everything we do. The landscape for East and Southern Africa has dramatically changed in 2021 from what it was in 2020. We have an urgent need to crowd in more resources in a sustainable way. Financing for sustainable development is an investment. We believe that sustainable agriculture intensification looks broadly at making food more affordable, nutritious, safe, and healthier. We also believe that by crowding in resources to the agricultural sector, we're going to improve productivity, efficiency of resource use, reduce pollution, and reduce a lot of food loss and waste. In doing so, we do believe that one of the main areas of focus is to mitigate the impacts of climate change, to promote the One Health approach, and to improve the environment from a biodiversity, soil, and water quality perspective. We want to do all of this because at the heart of our mandate is rural transformation, and we want to improve social inclusion and incomes of smallholder farmers. Currently, we are in our 11th financing cycle, which ends this year. We are now trying to crowd in, together with other global partners, an ambitious program for IFAD 12, which starts at the beginning of 2022, where we have an ambition to crowd in $1 billion US. Our model is co-financing, it's partnerships. So in all the projects we promote for transformation, we request beneficiaries, private sector, government, and international co-financing. It's really a partnership model that seeks for sustainable change. I'll stop there and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you. The next one, Levis, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Angeline. My name is Levis Kavagi, and thank you for this opportunity to be here to participate in the webinar. My organization is the United Nations Environment Program. It's part of the UN system. Our mandate is focused on environment. And within there, we have different tracks of programmatic tracks like climate change, ecosystems, pollution, and looking at generally chemicals and chemical wastes and the science that is relating to the state of environment. We have quite a bit of work ongoing on agroecology, which we will be happy to share and discuss, and to see how it fits into this webinar. But specifically, the challenges that we see facing agriculture in specific is, as been mentioned by David, the need to produce more to feed an expanding or a fast growing population. But therein, there are some things that we could be able to do. There's the challenge of climate change and the increase in diseases and things like that, drought and floods. There is also the challenge of the changing dietary requirements amongst the populations, and therefore adapting newer or different forms of agricultural practices. But then from our perspective as a UN is how do we balance between agricultural production and securing nature? Because at the bottom line, we need the planet. We need a healthy planet to be able to continue to feed ourselves. Everything depends upon a healthy, well-functioning, productive nature. So this is to us a very big challenge that we look at. I will be happy to share more details as we go along.
Up my microphone. Thank you very much, Levis. We will talk further about this just a little bit later. Coletta, would you like to introduce yourself, please, from Tanzania?
Habari, as we say in Kiswahili. My name is Coletta Nzunguru Mzava. I am the Director of Policy Research and Planning here at Tanzania Agriculture Development Bank, or TADB, if you will. TADB is a publicly owned entity. It is others would term it as a public development bank. Our fundamental role is to attain food sustainability as well as food sufficiency, which actually form as a central theme in the Tanzania's development vision. And we also have another, should I call it a dual role, which requires us to catalyze transformation of agriculture in our country, from subsistence farming to commercial agriculture. And when I speak about agriculture in the Tanzanian context, this now includes fisheries and livestock, and I guess forestry, if you will. So yes, I know we all want to support sustainability in the world, especially food security. However, there's always a financing component that needs to be addressed. And this is where banks such as ourselves would come in and support that area.
Thank you very much for your introduction, Coletta. We are going to follow with Olusegun Falade. Your microphone is off.
Thank you very much. Olusegun Falade is my name. I'm a director and a general manager in Flour Mills of Nigeria PLC. Flour Mills of Nigeria, our appellation is feeding the nation every day. We've been in this country and this business for 60 years. We celebrated our 60th birthday in October 2020. So we are synonymous with the birthday of Nigeria as a country. What do we do as a business? As a private sector investor, our main focus when we started was wheat milling, for the population of Nigeria, to feed the massive population that we have. And that particular business has transformed from a little over 100,000 metric tons per annum of wheat milling to about 1.2 million metric tons per annum right now. We also know that when we talk about sustainability and food security, especially when it comes to Nigeria as a country, there is a need for backward integration in order to be able to preserve the economy of the country and to preserve the foreign exchange instead of importing, but we want to domicile production in the country. As a result, about 15, 20 years ago, we ventured into full agriculture as a result of backward integration. So FMN is divided into two main businesses. You have the food business and you have the FMN Agro, which is focused primarily on agriculture, both in the production and also in the downstream. I will talk more about the agro business as we go forward, but our investment in that is in the hundreds of billions of naira, ranging from palm value chain to oil and fat to animal protein to even real farming, with over 60,000 hectares of farms that are owned by FMN, planting various aspects. As we go along in this, we'll be talking about how are we challenged as far as these areas are concerned. What are we doing as businesses? One, to look at what is militating against agriculture in Nigeria and how it affects our businesses and what we are doing. So I'll be looking forward to share more of these insights as we go along. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And then the last but not least, as we said, Mr. Menzome Gary, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here. My apologies for joining late first.
No worries.
And then secondly, I see that Zoom has not dictated my camera.
Okay.
It's not something I can resolve within the span of this meeting.
Okay.
However, my name is Menzome Gary. I am the Director General of the Nigeria Agribusiness Group. The Nigeria Agribusiness BG, as we call it fondly, is an umbrella organization of associations of actors in the agribusiness value chain. What we do is that we work closely with the private sector to observe and analyze issues and the problems that we do see with private sector participation in agriculture in Nigeria, and then we advise the government on policy and direction. The NABG has a council, and that council comprises mostly of the top players in the agribusiness value chains. We have segments, and I was expecting Mr. Falade to tell you that he leads the agro-input segment of the Nigeria Agribusiness Group. So they are actually the movers and the shakers of the group. But basically, like we said, we aggregate views, we aggregate the issues from all major players in the agribusiness sector, and then we distill them, and then we look at the best way forward. We are now advise government on the way to go. The Nigeria Agribusiness Group has done quite a lot in areas of policy. For example, the issues of fertilizer. We have led the movement, the drive to stop the importation of whole fertilizer into Nigeria. Today, you can only bring in raw materials and blend. And thanks to that initiative, we have, in the last 3-4 years, our blending capacity has more than doubled. Virtually all the blending plants in Nigeria have kind of gotten back to life, and many more are coming. The Nigeria Agribusiness Group also has been at the very forefront of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, the development of the roadmap of the agriculture and the agribusiness workstream, and we are pushing for that integration because we see the great opportunities that exist in Africa as a unified market. So I will stop here, and we'll talk further as the meeting or the summit goes on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Menzo. Thank you to all our speakers for the introduction. I'm going to give the floor to Ian now, and we will go ahead on the discussion.
No, very briefly, thank you for this first presentations. And yes, I think the situation is changing very fast, and that's the key point. It's moving so quickly. And also thank you for sharing this very important role of demography inside this system. And because, as you say, the objective is to feed all and every day, but this demographic impact need to be addressed to understand the figures. I'm very happy also to see that there is a red line between your discussion, which is cooperations. Finally, we heard a lot about sharing experience, about creating policy, and investing or co-investing between private and public sector. And I think this cooperation, specifically in Africa, is key because it will reveal all the knowledge and all the expertise of the African continent to address these transitions, agricultural transitions. So you talked a lot about climate change, so let's have a focus on this climate change impact. There is today worldwide discussions. You have the COP, and government are all considering that as a key world issue. But sometimes the situation is different from a region to another one, specifically in Africa. So I don't want to talk about your personal region, but for example, with your brother in Kenya, you know, in the west of the country, they are facing flood, and in the east of the country, they are in the middle of drought since months and years. And that in the same country and within the same populations, and I guess in all of your country you have the same observation. So let's address these climate change situations, how it impacts to agriculture, but with keeping in mind that on our model, agriculture will impact positively in climate change. That's a very important heritage that can be built. So. Angelina, let's move on this. Thank you.
Indeed, this year we will welcome a new round of talks about Convention on Biological Diversity, COP 2015, and as it is today a focus for government agenda and the whole economic world. Mr. Levis Kavagi, could you share with us the challenges of the apparent complexity between ensuring biodiversity conversion on one hand and agricultural productivity on the other? And should there be such a competition in the first place? Your microphone, ladies.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Angeline, for this question. Actually, for Africa, let me just narrow down to Africa. We know that there's this global assessment that was issued a year ago, which meant say that we risk losing up to 1 million species if we do not take any action. And therefore, actually, 2020 was the year which we called the year for nature. But because of COVID, the discussion that would have culminated into the world coming up with a new commitment to biodiversity has been delayed. I'm not sure if it will be held this year in 2021. But the basic thing is that if the world does not take any action currently, and if we continue with business as usual, we risk losing the very foundation onto which life is dependent. And if we lose this foundation, it means that all species, will be at risk. And life on Earth, as we know it today, will be dramatically different. But now, if you tie this, there are many drivers, let me say, there are many drivers of change that are causing loss or extinction of species. Climate change is one of them. For Africa, we have seen that invasive alien species is a big, big driver of change. We also know that land degradation, where land that was previously productive becomes unproductive, is also a big challenge for Africa. And then we have illegal trade in species, both animal and plant species, is also causing, driving towards a loss of biodiversity, biological diversity. Just for the sake of the audience, biological diversity is an emphasis on the fact that all life on Earth is dependent on each other. Human beings need food. We get this food from plants and animals. Those plants depend on others for nutrients. Animals depend on others. They depend on plants, for example, to get their food. So all these life species, as we call them, are interconnected and interrelated. And we need to maintain the balance, the biological balance between the species for life to continue being as it should be. In Africa, one of the issues that is also contributing towards loss of biodiversity could be related to agriculture. As David said at the opening of this session, he said that as populations grow, we need to produce more. We need to get more food to feed more mouths. How do we do this? We can do this by expanding the land that we have for production. If we expand the land that we have for production, it means we are entering into new virgin lands. And this has been one of the causes of degradation. This has been one of the causes of loss of species, especially when forest land is opened up, especially when wetlands are opened up, for example, to grow more rice. In some countries, it is preferred to use flooded methods of producing rice. And therefore, wetlands and marshlands are being opened up to get more food. That is one way to expand, to increase the food production by expanding land. But there is where we have a challenge between producing more food and interfering with the biological biodiversity. Secondly, you can increase more food by intensification, both in plants, crops, and in animals. But as you do intensification, there are negative impacts. There are different ways to do intensification. And some of them have gone to the extent of using, let me call them drugs, for example, especially in animal production. But when you come to crop production, there's an increased use of fertilizers, increased use of pesticides, to the extent that they become counterproductive to biological diversity. A quick example is pollinators. Bees, we know them, they do pollination. They enable crops that depend on pollination to be able to bear fruit or seed. Without pollination, then there will be no food. But if you increase the amount of insecticides that are being used, then you risk also wiping out the bee population. And a study has been done by UNEP and other partners, which has shown that the number of pollinators in the world is on the decrease. It is declining. And if it is declining, the inverse is that we will have less food. So a good way or a good intention that was meant to produce more food becomes counterproductive on the long run because it threatens the very foundation of food production. Thirdly, we can come up with innovation, and I hope this is where this webinar is focused, where you can produce more food using innovative methods, including those that go back to the roots of culture and society, how the cultures and society produce food, and how this can be applied in an innovative way to produce more food or to produce food in a distributed way. So this is the challenge that we are facing currently. And Africa is, as I said before, is coupled with this, is facing the incidence of climate change, where we have increased instances of drought, increased instances of floods. At the same time, the phenomenon of land that is being degraded. As land is being degraded by various reasons, it could be by agriculture itself, but it could also be by other factors. We also risk losing the foundation of food production. Now, the work that we are doing is to relate ecosystem health and productivity to various aspects of life. Relating, in this instance for our webinar, specifically relating biodiversity, for example. Looking at how do we combine agriculture? How do we use agriculture in a way that it fosters and maintains biodiversity? And some of the work that we're doing here is to look at the trade-off analysis, to look at if you increase food production in a particular ecology, what will be the impact on biodiversity? And if you protect biodiversity by not producing food, what will be the impact on the food security and nutritional requirements of the local populations? We are also looking at the economics of ecosystems. What, in many instances, what curtails the balance between agriculture and nature is that the contribution of nature to food production and the contribution from nature on productivity is often not taken into consideration. If we take into consideration the services that nature provides to be able to obtain food, then it will become more apparent on what needs to be done to protect species in a way that we practice agriculture that is sustainable in the long run. Pollinators have just spoken about it. It's a service that we get from nature, that birds, bees, and certain animal species that do pollination help to ensure that there is food production. But there are other services as well, including services that are related to water, for example. For food production, for animal production, for forestry, we need also to have water that is reliable and dependable. And how do we impact upon water resources in our food production systems? So we are trialing, for example, rice varieties that do not require a lot of flooding, a lot of water, or flooding in terms of production. Like highland rice is one of the experiments that we are working with together with countries to see how do we produce more food, but without compromising the nature and the ecosystem services. When I talk about ecosystem services, I mean the benefits that we get from nature to be able to live or to be able to undertake our productive activities. Thirdly is looking at nature itself as providing a solution. Nature can provide a solution to some of the challenges that we have in food production. Nature, for example, we can call it a place where we intervene between the pathogens that come from, let's say, animals to human beings. And the environment is very good at doing this. It's a nature-based solution towards preventing pathogens from jumping from animals, which we during production, to human beings as diseases. This disease control can be done by nature, but at the same time, the use of antimicrobials, for example, is becoming a problem in the sense that I mentioned intensified animal production, where there's a lot of use of antimicrobials in the production of animals for food. And in the process, they end up in the water systems. And the water systems are loaded to an extent that they cannot naturally, in the nature-based solution point of view, they cannot naturally filter out these pathogens and ensure that the flow of water is suitable for agricultural production and human consumption. So we are faced with also the issue of invasive alien species. Some of these invasive alien species have been propagated by good intention. For example, for fodder, certain species are introduced for fodder, but in the process, they become alien. They take over the place where they've been introduced, they take over. And this becomes a problem because then they prevent the other species in these areas from doing well. It also has the same problem is with aquatic species and marine species. There are invasive species that, and some of them are not as a result of agriculture. They are as a result of environment, where conservationists in the effort of restoration, for example, where we are undertaking ecosystem restoration, we introduce certain species, but in the long run, maybe 30 years, 50 years later, we notice that these species have taken over and they have colonized an area where the indigenous species are no longer thriving, and this becomes a threat to the ecosystem services that this particular area can provide, and therefore a problem. Last but not least is the ways in which we can have a compromise or a balance between agriculture and planet health. And in these areas, some of the issues that we need to deal with are how do we, for example, do agroforestry. That is the combination of tree species together with crop species, and which can also benefit animals that are being produced for food. We have seen that in some cases, for example, in an experiment we have done in Ethiopia, has shown that the quality of coffee grown in Ethiopian highlands, when it is combined with agroforestry, combination of coffee growing with other tree species, you find the quality of the coffee is much higher and it's able to command a higher price in the coffee markets. But the question now, which I'm not an expert, is how do we then make sure that this type of coffee is recognized? And because unless it is recognized and given due value, then the efforts by farmers to do this kind of agriculture, is limited. I will stop there and wait to contribute more after my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lavis, for enlightening us about these major challenges and issues, notably related to biodiversity. We have another expert on food security and ecosystem preservation. Mr. David Terungwa, you are working hard to build a smart agriculture. Can you tell us more how you engage farmers and producers to rethink their models, and as a non-profit organization, how do you assist the agricultural sector to best adapt to climate change?
Thank you, Angeline. So climate change affects agriculture as we all know it, and it is the vulnerable people, the rural farmers, that are most impacted. How are they affected? 4 basic ways. First, increase in temperature is destroying all the indigenous seedlings and species. Most of the seedlings that our farmers use are not improved. Many were inherited for their forefathers and they keep repeating them year in, year out. And now the temperature is increasing. The temperatures in the past, in the 70s and 60s, 80s, and 90s, at which these seeds were thriving, is no longer the same as now. Just like we humans, as the temperature goes higher than our body system can cope, we fall sick. Same with the plants. And so many of them end up with toxins. Common that most of our farmers are rain-fed dependent agriculturists. We practice little irrigation if you go by statistics across Africa. Nearly most of our rural farmers depend largely on rainfall. Now, with the change in rainfall patterns, short duration drought, and here and there, they are not able to plan. They plant, hoping and praying that the rains will come, and then there is delay, and all the investment is gone. Outbreak of disease, very common. The locust in East Africa just last year is a clear example. It doesn't just affect crop farmers alone, even the animal producers as well. Same with flooding, of course, comes with a lot of soil erosion, soil degradation, and the likes. So we, as an organization, is mobilizing these communities to first of all understand the issues within their communities. And how are we doing this? 2 approaches. First, we develop climate risk registers for each community. So all the communities are able to identify some of the potential climate change risks that are evident within that community. And the farmers are the ones who identify these registers, these risks themselves, and also suggest solutions based on indigenous knowledge. And the next step is we introduce land use planning. As the climate is changing, the environment is changing, so we too must change. we cannot, and the farmers cannot continue to practice agriculture the way it was in the past. So land must be planned. You don't go farming on floodplains when you know that there will be flooding. You need to be sure that there will be adequate rainfall to plant certain crops. If you are not able, then you supplement with irrigation. Now, those are some of the little techniques we are teaching these farmers, but more importantly, introducing them to organic farming. Our soils are no longer fertile. It is a serious issue across Africa. Some of the reasons Levis mentioned: the heavy use of agrochemicals. When I was listening to Mr. Faladi and he talked about the oil palm plantation, I was quick to ask him, how did you get the land? Did you clear the entire forest and all of that? You know, this is commercial farming, and when it is done, the environment suffers. In as much as we want the food, when it goes to a certain limit, the environment suffers. And so there is, the biodiversity is affected. But the heavy use of agrochemicals is a serious issue, most especially for these rural farmers who don't know anything about these chemicals. They are just introduced and then they begin to use them. So we teach these farmers the negative impact of agrochemicals and then introduce simple ways through which they can improve their soil. But going back to how we can really tackle the food security issue in Africa, one thing I've personally observed working with communities is that with what we are producing, we can really feed ourselves. There is too much food waste along the value chain. Post-harvest losses are huge. Nearly 50% of what is produced goes to waste. They are not able to store. Tomatoes is in season right now in some parts of Nigeria. And if you pass through where these farmers are producing, they harvest, and in 2-3 days time, if they are not able to sell, it's gone. So it is money wasted, investments wasted, and all of that. But if all of this is kept, stored, preserved, then we'll have enough to feed ourselves. So we wouldn't be talking of expanding our lands and going into forest and all of that. But the serious issue that is affecting our farmers today is climate change. And they need to be mobilized to really even understand itself that climate change is an issue affecting their food production. And it is not just, if the rains don't come, it is not the witches and wizards, as in some parts of Africa it is believed. Climate change is the cause, and we sincerely, as a matter of political will, need to build the capacities of these rural farmers to adapt to the changing climate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, for your expertise and engagement. We are now going to hear the vision of an agroeconomic operator, Mr. Olusegun Falade. Your company is developing the agroeconomic markets in Nigeria since 60 years now. And how did you witness the impact of climate change in your sector? And how is going the global agricultural transition in Nigeria, not only due to climate change, but also to develop a more respectful model to guarantee a positive impact on our environment and socially?
Thank you, thank you very much, Angeli. I want to thank all the participants. I listened with rapt attention, and all the things everybody mentioned, especially on the issue of agroecology, climate change, as is something that is practical. However, from the perspective of an economic actor in this space, it's a question of the chicken and the egg. Which one comes first? You really want to protect the environment, okay? But you also want to provide food in quantities. You also want to recover your investments, because the main aim of going into business in the first instance is to be able to recover your investment. I mean, put investment in and have a return on investment after so many months or so many years. So as far as we in FMN is concerned, it's been a major challenge as far as climate change is concerned. I will give you one practical example. We are in the sugarcane value chain. We own a land that is over 20,000 hectares of land in the middle of Nigeria, in Niger State, and is very close to the bank of River Niger. We are planting sugarcane, and we already sunk over 50 billion naira into that project, where we are cultivating and also converting those sugarcane into raw sugar. This is a big investment. However, like we have already mentioned, almost on a yearly basis, there is serious flooding that breaks the dikes and floods the entire environment. Sometimes the entire plantation of over 3,000 hectares are wiped out. You lose investment, you lose so many things. So it's a major challenge that we have. And what we are trying to do now is to see how do we continue to do a divestment from that area into other areas with all the infrastructure that have been put into that place. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect, as far as climate change, as David has already mentioned just now, is very important for us to realize one thing. There are so many studies that have been done. A lot of non-governmental organizations have gone into the field to teach rural farmers. A lot of things are being done. Unfortunately, majority of those activities and efforts, most especially with NGOs and also research institutes, most of those information and the research that are done sometimes are cooling off in files, and they are not publicized for those who will need it to be able to use it. Because the major aspect of this is that we are talking about usage of fertilizer, usage of agrochemicals, how it degrades the environment, and so on and so forth. Yes, everybody knows this. And we also accept that our soil has been degraded over the years. The question is that it is the same land that is available for farming year on year. And if we do not find something for these farmers to be able to increase their yield and be able to ensure food security for themselves and also for the other people, a time will come in that things will degrade. So what are we doing as a business? I think that's where I want to focus my attention on. Let's look at the issue of seed and seedlings that David actually mentioned. In the traditional African agriculture, one of the major reasons, and like Levis also said, how do you increase productivity? It's either you increase the land or you increase productivity per hectare, and that is a major thing. But what do people do is that they just increase land, and then each land continue to give you less and less as you go on. Our focus as FMN, and that's exactly the model we are running all over the country right now, is what do we do to increase the average yield per hectare of each of these farmers, especially in the value chain that we are very much interested in. Okay? These are wheat, maize, soybean, and palm oil, and cassava. Those 5 value chain. We are focused on it because we are in this value chain. Apart from the food security for people to eat, there's also the sustainability of the industries also to create employment and also to make profit. So you must be able to have sources of raw materials for these people. So our major goal is, for instance, how do you increase maize from an average of about 2.4 metric tons an hectare to about 5 metric tons an hectare? We know temperature rises is degrading the silt. So what we are doing is we are providing cold storages in so many of these areas to be able to put the right seed into their hands and for them to be able to plant and increase. We have seen tremendous improvement in this, especially in our FMN agro project that we are doing both in Kaduna State and also in Niger State. The result is extremely very, very tremendous. However, having said this, how can we collaborate and cooperate with all these NGOs and the Research Institute for the knowledge we have already had to be publicized for people like FMN who engage in massive food production, so that they can use some of these efforts in doing what they are doing? A lot of effort is put on rural farmers, which is very good. That is, 90% of what we are going to do is going to be on rural farmers. But when you are able to demonstrate to the rural farmers, either by the actions you have already done or which you are doing, and they can see it face to face that people like them are the ones that are producing these results, the rate of adoption becomes very, very fast, and then we can actually go to where we are going to. So what we are doing is that, yes, we are actually very much involved in production of fertilizer, seed, and other CPP. We are focusing our attention on biological pesticides right now, okay? In order for us to be able to stop these toxins that people are putting in, especially when you are fighting disease like fall armyworm, for instance, all right, which is affecting maize. We are focusing our attention on that. That's number one. On fertilizer, whether we like it or not, the use of organic and especially inorganic fertilizer is going to be massive as we go forward, because for now is a chicken or the egg. You want to produce food massively. However, while you are doing that, we are also developing some other organic materials that over time we can demonstrate the usage of it, and as it increases the production of food, then we can now escalate them to a lot of the farmers in the country. The question is this: we want food security, we want biodiversity, we want agroecology, all right? All of them will come together, but one will suffer while the other one grows. The most important thing is that, the first thing is that you have to provide food security if you don't want to have political problem, okay? So that you can have time to do your research. If there's political turmoil, nobody will be able to do research. Look at the environment we are talking about now and the effect of climate change. The effect of climate change is making herders of cattle to move from very hot locations into areas that are much more conducive for their cows. Okay? Now, what is the effect of that is causing a lot of herdsmen and problems that is occurring in a lot of these areas, and farmers are no longer able to go to the farm because they are afraid of their lives. So, like I said, it's a chicken and the egg. But the question is that we must do both of them side by side. There is a lot of information that are out there that those who should use it are not able to see or use them. We must produce this to be able to do that. Nigeria Agricultural Business Group has a section that is actually focusing on this. And I think Dr. Manzo is going to talk about that. But from the investor's perspective, you don't want to lose money, okay? As you are putting that into place, you don't want to. In most African countries, What the government are doing is policy, policy, policy. When it comes to actual doing in a massive scale, it is these companies that are being forced to go downstream to go and produce and bring all these things in. Therefore, it's a question of what is economically feasible and what is politically astute and what is humanly sustainable at the end of the day. Those are the three areas that I will want to work on. However, those knowledge will help us in our cassava farming process because we are using all this we are using farmers to grow most of these things. We can teach them some of these things so that we can sustain the environment. If not, we can only do what we know. Okay, if we do what we know, then we will get the result we are looking for. Whatever happens to the environment, we'll talk about that one later. But that should not be the way it should be. When we have this knowledge, and this knowledge is there, we can transfer it to the market and see what we need to do. Right now, just the last point. Right now, in the last couple of weeks, I've been traveling all over the country. I just came back from Kaduna yesterday. What are we doing? Is that we have found out that there's a lot of maize being produced in that area. But the average is about 1.8, 2.2. All right, over expense on land. And they can generate at least 5 metric tons per hectare. So we have invested in a lot of training materials, in a lot of do it and see it kind of effort to be able to at least increase. If we can demonstrate that within that space, then to escalate it and to do a kind of a modular test across the country will be a lot easier. We've waited for so long because a lot of talks have been made. We cannot wait any longer. We need to go in and do something to be able to do that. Wheat production in Nigeria now, as I'm talking to you now, has been escalated by FMN, all right, with the assistance of other flour millers, because over 2 million metric tons of wheat is coming into the country by export. And everybody is saying that we cannot grow wheat profitably in this country. Who says so? We are demonstrating that now with over 300,000 hectares of land being planted as I'm talking to you now, and we're waiting for harvest very, very soon. Do it, show it, and then we can now use all the knowledge that everybody has to further improve it so that the environment can be safer, and then we can do a lot with the food security. I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much, Olusegun. After speeches like those ones, I think the only thing I can do is open the floor quickly before switching to part 4. If somebody would like to add something, feel free.
Yes, I would just like to appreciate the passion and the ideas that have been put forward in this specific round. I think all the perspectives, the private sector perspective, civil society perspective, and really the science behind what needs to happen has been presented. I think the challenge is, and I just want to reiterate that we already have many hungry people already. So it's not only about 2030 or 2050 and a growing population. We actually have about 700 million people currently hungry and 2 billion undernourished. The undernourishment comes in, as Levis said very clearly, the temperature rise reduces the nutrient content in the crops we're eating on the African continent. So the cassava we used to eat 20 years ago does not have the same nutritional value as a cassava that's grown now because of higher temperatures. So this is actually impacting on our nutritional profile. And today you have many more Africans with certain diseases than you had in the past. This is actually a scientific fact and it's very clear. So how are we going to reverse that if we don't do something? And the trend looks quite dangerous from a nutritional perspective in our diets. The cost of a healthy diet for an average African is it's about $2.5 if you want the dietary diversity that we need to have. So how do we have the dual or triple challenge of increasing incomes on one hand so that people can buy affordable, nutritious food, and then also producing it sustainably and getting it into the hands of smallholder farmers. I think this is, and the third aspect is we have about 600 million young people out there without employment. They need to be gainfully employed, and the continent needs to create the jobs for that. I don't think young people are ready to go and do traditional agriculture, which is not mechanized. So and I think a number of you already discussed about the politics and the economics and the challenges with lack of inclusivity, inequality, and lack of income. Despite the fact that we're importing so much food and we still can't afford to buy it, we have fractures in the supply chains and also fractures in demand. We have a growing number of urban poor people who are not able to feed themselves, and even rural who are exposed to those climate risks. So from my perspective, we need to really introduce systems and mechanisms that are able to address, it's complex, these 3 or 4 challenges. We need to introduce operations that do that, but incentivize all actors to come together. So I think Davis mentioned the payment for ecosystem services. We remunerate smallholder farmers for the production of food, but we ignore that they play an important environmental service. So they're the ones who would be incentivized with the technologies Ulusuna, Mr. Faladi has talked about. They also, a very important point is as they practice conservation farming, also support water and the water stress, which is actually a major problem around climate change. Unfortunately, African soils retain less water than other soils around the world. We know this, and 95% of our agriculture is rain-fed. But without water, you can't produce any food. So we need to have new technologies there, even practical water-fed technology scaled up, so that smallholder farmers can access this. So how can we incentivize those smallholder farmers, not only with markets, but also for the environmental services that they're actually providing to all of us? Once we recognize and quantify what that environmental service includes, I heard pollination, I heard water filtration, soil management to improve the quality of the soil, even better quality soil actually captures carbon better. We can introduce financing mechanisms that recognize that service. And this is what governments should be doing, to actually have policies that incentivize farmers to get access to the market, but also their role in producing sustainably. At the global and regional levels, we should be able to track and confirm this and incentivize those in the private sector that are actually promoting sustainable practices. And you can actually monitor that with big data, with drones now. You can do amazing things to understand how land has moved from poor agricultural practices to new ones. So we do have the tools, but how does it come together? I think this is a challenge for our day. The organizing and the logistics in the African context seems to be a challenge. We seem to know what we need to do, but how to bring it together in a package of a series of interventions seems to still be challenging us. And I'm not fully convinced that it's beyond our capacity. I think it's in there, but how do we do that? Maybe I stop here in terms of that. Just maybe one additional point is our marketing systems. Now, we understand that there is rapid urbanization. It is an opportunity in the food economy, but if the political economy just provides basically import permits for food in a few hands, and that's not done in a transparent way, you end up spending quite a lot on imports and locking out smallholders farmers' access to urban markets, which is completely wrong. So we need to really create more transparency around the import drive, and then to put down the infrastructure that's going to reduce and improve access of smallholder farmers to these urban African markets. We shouldn't be importing all of the food. It should be possible to get that food into the urban space through logistics on one hand, but also we have urban markets which are very traditional. very messy, not well structured, just a one-time investment in these open African markets that we are so proud of would change the system. In fact, the fact that the logistics, the food distribution systems in our urban centers are very poor and they're very expensive. They actually drive up the price and cost of food. So going in and looking at those two major markets, whether it's in Tanzania, whether it's in Lagos, one of these mega cities, Kinshasa, and putting the investments there to offload. Can you imagine today we still only have maybe 2, Johannesburg and in Zimbabwe, auction markets, where these auction markets for tobacco, for instance, where we see in Japan fishermen can go in and actually auction off their fish, really allowing them access and the ability to gain directly from the market. So we need to modernize these systems, and this will also enable for improved access of smallholder farmers. So over to you, Angeline.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Jan?
He's back. I think that Sarah, that was really important contribution, and thanks to all of you for sharing your expertise. And it's a real question, facing climate change, how can we produce more food? How can we maintain the good balance between human, nature, vegetable? David, it's really interesting your approach on awareness with the climate risk register and to really build tools to maintain this dialogue, because you also mentioned that, Mr. Olusgun, you remember us that we still need to advocate, we still need to educate people on that. Thanks very much. Sarah, I think you make the right transitions to the next discussions, and I know we are running in time, but I think it's also very important. But so access to innovations, access to new technology, new system, new mechanism, mutualizing those innovations so everybody can have access to them. You talked about drone. We know there is satellite information to upmost the water, feeding, the use of the water. You talked about fertilizations. You talked about all those important key points. How can we, and now there is a lot of development, how can we access to that? So let's jump to this second part of access to new technology. But again, that was fantastic contributions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan. I think now we are going to hear Mrs. Coletta Nduguru Mwazava. Please let me know if the spelling was not okay. Sorry for this. As an operator in finance and banking services, what is the trend in the economic context to find the right balance between financial needs, banking mechanism, and risk management to assist agroecology development program?
Thank you, and thank you so much for all your contributions. I've obviously learned significantly, because like I said, as a DFI or as a development finance institution, our role is to respond to the varying challenges within the ecosystem. So we respond using finance as a tool, but we also respond through policy intervention. I know somebody mentioned we talk a lot about policy, but as a policy bank, we do have to provide that policy suggestion as well. We also do impact smallholders, for example, through funding from partners. We have an on-lending program where we've extended financing to smallholder farmers. But of course, given the way we are constructed, we have like, we don't have a wide branch network, so we use partner banks to on lend to smallhold farmers that supports the different value chains. Our intervention model is we intervene across the whole value chain. So, and I recall during the call, somebody did mention post-harvest. There's a call to intervene in the post-harvest space. We do that through the financing of silos, warehouses, but also cold chain facilities. Irrigation infrastructure is also an area that we do finance and support. But yeah, we do look at the whole ecological system as well, and see how we could support through funding as well as policy analysis. Our intention is not, well, we look for impact, but we're also, we do look for projects that have commercial viability, because that also feeds into the whole sustainability of the projects as well going forward. So I hope that has clarified our interventions in these areas.
Thank you very much, Coletta, for enlightening us on the TADB activities and program. We would like to now hear to Dr. Menzo Mengari, because as a major organization working to assist Nigeria agriculture sector to develop its economy, its influence and impact, how do you explore the new technology and financing system that could be mutualized by the global sector?
Well, first and foremost, the Nigeria Agribusiness Group believes sincerely and that except we create an enterprise in farming, the African farmer will never be sustainable. And the reason is simple. The landscape is dominated by smallholder farmers who are on their own are not viable commercially. Besides that, they also do not even have the capacities to access all these technologies, funding, and all that we are talking about on their own. And therefore, what we have tried to do is to come up with a model whereby we cluster farmers. And that model has been tested, and it's actually proven the solution to a major part of the problem. What we simply do is we look at big players in our group who are focused on a certain value chains like flour mills, Nestle, the Olams, Nigerian breweries, and the likes. And we go to areas where we connect them to farmers in areas with competitive advantages in those value chains. And they help these farmers develop a structure. They get them to make them financially inclusive, because most of them do not even have bank accounts in the first place, let alone talk about them being able to access bank loans or funding. So these big players will handhold them. They agree with them on predetermined prices, on what to buy, on how to buy their commodities, and then they help them to standardize practices in their farms. Then also help them to develop the economics of production, whereby they will begin to see farming as a business. And through at every cycle, at the end of every cycle, they are able to know whether they actually made profit or not, because as they had always played, they just grow food, eat, and have some small excess that they sell, if at all they get.
Menzo, I think we're losing the connection.
Has been stated as a major challenge, which is post-harvest loss. In some of the value chains, post-harvest loss can be as high as 90%. And to storage facilities, can you hear me? Sorry, I think my, hello?
Yes,
hello?
I hear you.
Sorry, I think my connection is unstable. So what I'm saying, another issue is the issue of post-harvest loss. And therefore, post-harvest loss is a major challenge to smallholder farmers. So clustering them together with a big player that handholds them helps them to overcome this, as the big player will immediately aggregate. Sometimes slightly up, they should be paid market prices. Do this, that first farmers will become competitive because the big players can also provide them common services, be it extension, be it seeds, be it other inputs that are required for them to play competitively. And at the end, they aggregate at their produce and then provide market. This way, the farmers will become competitive. And then we help them to become, as they create those clusters, you teach them group dynamics, and then they end up becoming a strong cooperative that can be registered as a corporate entity and get strong bargaining power. This way, they will be able to access whether the best quality inputs or is it the technologies that we are talking about, so that they can compete. Another issue that is a major challenge to the development of an enterprise in Africa is the issue of standards. Most farms do not have standards, regulations, and certification. These are very key challenges, and therefore you find out that most of the time, accessing premium markets is a challenge. Because take, for example, the EU. The EU will not buy your commodity if it doesn't have this global gap certification. The good or NISAT or other or organic certifications. These farmers in reality cannot afford this. So it is only through clusterization that we see that we can support them to achieve this. And then also bring in young people who are open to innovations, because without young people, the old people will continue to do things the way they understand best. Their mindsets are set. They are not open to change. So, but if you open it up to include young people, then you find out that they'll be open to adopt technologies and innovations. There are quite a number of projects that are happening now. And I can say for sure, like Mr. Falade said, flour mills is in the forefront of this. They have their own robust platform where they deliver extension services and all other inputs to their farmers, and the results are clear. They're very, very clear because they stand out. You have others like the Olams, you have Nestle, they're all playing in the space. WAMCO, which is the West African Milk Company, is also doing the same in dairy. Some of our members like CHI farms are looking at doing the same in poultry, because it is a concept that we have found to be sustainable. Otherwise, the young people will not find space to express themselves, and the adoption of these technologies is actually going to become a major challenge. So that is what I can say. But of course, the potentials are great, and especially in the area of logistics, particularly cold chain logistics. Nigeria is a place that has great opportunities, as well as Africa. But the major challenge we have in Africa is that the whole of the African continent is remotely connected. And therefore, it is even cheaper to import something from outside the continent than to import from a neighboring country. It's a major challenge. Here, of course, as I said, the AU Commission is here, and we are engaging them on how we can facilitate regional integrations before we go continent-wide, so that people can easily reach out and trade. People can easily reach out, move and do businesses across borders. Like you said, there could be a flood in Mozambique or drought in Tanzania today, while there's excess food in Nigeria, the Cameroons, and the rest. But to move that food across to that other side of the divide can be a great challenge. And I tell you, it is only young people who are adventurous, who are open to do business, that can take up this challenge, and that will be augmented by technology. And we can really achieve a lot if we open up the space and make the agribusiness sector a lot more attractive. So this is the submission that I can say for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Menzo. We are going to switch quickly with Sarah because I know you have to leave. So Sarah, would you have just a few minutes to tell us about what innovation are needed in the agriculture finance to address specific needs of youth and notably women agripreneurs?
Yes, thank you. It's unfortunate that I have no more time to dedicate to the platform, but I will try to be as brief as possible. I just want to really pick up from where Manzo left off. I think transformation is impossible without finance. And we see that for the food economy right across the continent, this is the biggest private sector activity that exists. And just the sheer volume of the business that Mr. Falandi talked about gives you what potential agriculture holds for change and development and for transformation, for employment, etc., right across the continent. That said, access to finance, agriculture is a sector which is the least funded. There's a huge financing gap. And this is because there's very little understanding of the risk environment involved in investing. It's seen as a risky business because value chains have become global and concentrated in a few hands. You see, in fact, a mass exodus of young men going to urban centers to seek employment and a feminization, in fact, of agriculture across the continent, which shouldn't happen. But it's simply because the opportunities to access finance are not there, and the cost of capital is tremendous. Apparently, to access finance on the African continent is 3 or 4 times more expensive than in Asia or any of the other continents around the world. So how can we change that dynamic? As governments try to bridge the SDG financing gap, and right now we understand we need something like 1.3, 1.4 trillion annually to be spent in order to actually bring about that transformation. We need to crowd in these resources. And we know public sources are not sufficient. We have global partners, we have philanthropy. We in Africa are not able to use remittances in a clever way. Remittances being sent by the diaspora is actually much more than aid flows today. How can we create financing structures that are going to be able to crowd that in those remittances and enable investment where it's needed? We've talked about the public sector. Yes, there's CADAP, there's AU, I think that was mentioned, but most African governments have not been able to invest the 10% that's needed for the transformation of the sector. And this is largely because they haven't been able to generate the revenues in terms of taxes and collect that in order to invest in agriculture. So we need to partner more with the private sector. And to do that, we need to actually partner with institutions such as collectors and come up with very innovative ways to de-risk and provide line of credit and introduce new financial products for unbanked, for people who don't have identities, for people who don't have collateral. So we need to actually transform the architecture of finance and financial services. I think it was Manzo who mentioned here that we're very fragmented. Connectivity is not only about roads and logistics, it's also about the internet. It's about getting people closer together, getting the aggregation that's needed that will reduce risk. And I think that's really the challenge that we have. The agri-SMEs are the backbone of the agricultural system in Africa, and they're providing so many services: storage, finance, transport, and we don't resource them sufficiently. So the first and the most important thing to do is to be able to introduce SME financing and wholesaling mechanisms for that at national level. We also need to actually partner with financial banks to provide equity. And as I said, the line of credits maybe to rural savings committees. Then we also need to also look at all the fintech that is out there, and the revolution created in Kenya with M-Pesa. They're coming out with different e-wallets, all types of mobile type solutions that will allow women and young people who don't have the same skills, the same access to collateral to also be banked. Imagine if you get a digital identity, which then allows you to develop a credit profile, which then allows you to be able to invest. But you have to couple that with an ecosystem that is focused on smallholders. The public agriculture extension systems have been under-financed for many years. They don't hold the solution. I think these relationships between private sector and smallholder farmers are absolutely critical. That's where we should reinforce and support the inputs. So if we can promote those types of models, this is exactly what is needed. I also think capital markets just across Africa are underdeveloped. They don't have a lot of liquidity. The stock exchanges sit there like maybe national museums, really. They're not active, there's no active trading in them. If you don't get corporations in there, you won't be able to access money for development purposes. So how do we crowd in and bring in investors? One way is to just harmonize. I'm happy to say that in East Africa, we've tried to introduce, well, East African communities have been trying to introduce common payment systems across borders. Because if I want to trade in Uganda with Tanzania or Kenya and Burundi, this will not happen if we don't have the financial architecture to actually help us resolve those things. So we have to put these systems in place. And I think those with experience in developing financial markets and deepening financial markets around the world can really help Africans think along how to do it. We have a great example with the South African Stock Exchange. There's something they've done right there. We can learn from that. How are they integrating financial markets? We also have Pan-African banks, which are fantastic now in nearly every sub-region. You have them. I think the West Africa Development Bank is very dynamic. How do we tap into them? We need to develop and modernize and increase competitiveness of financial markets in domestic markets. So allowing more users to be able to access different types of credit. We have a lot of impact investors that can provide equity that can be essential for startup. We need to build in the data gap for small businesses, for young people, for women, because the data gap suggests that there's lots of risks when in fact a very small farm holding can be very productive. And I just want to end my intervention by saying there are commercial farming methods with mechanization using no-till technologies that exist that don't break the soil. And I think those who are agricultural specialists here and who do commercial farming understand what I mean. So you can introduce tractors and technology that don't break the soil. And this is an excellent way of preserving the soil in commercial farming. You can also introduce nitrogen fixing plants. You can introduce rotational systems in commercial farming systems that really respect biodiversity and can be certifiably sustainable. So how do you get these practical technologies borrowed from agroecology into more commercial farming systems? I think this is really something that needs to be there. And the final state is if we can also try to introduce aquaculture as an alternative source of protein for communities, that could be a more sustainable change in our diet rather than livestock extensive farming systems that the soils cannot retain. But thank you very much for having me and the moderation from Jan and Angeline. I really enjoyed the conversation, and sorry I have to leave you now. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. We really appreciate your contribution. We wish you a lovely afternoon or end of the day, and we hope to welcome you again in our platform very soon. So thank you very much and have a very good end of the day. Okay.
Thank you.
Time I've been running, and I would like to propose perhaps to make a little conclusion. Perhaps all of you can take the floor one by one and just give your feedback as it comes, your suggestions or any proposition or call for actions. As I said in introduction, we are very keen also in resilience, but you can go over that and perhaps react on what I've been saying specifically on the last contributions. We just said when we addressed with Sarah that youth and women are definitely key on the future and specifically in agriculture. So let's start with the youth and women. And I would like to give the floor to Coletta, who look to be our youngest participant and very active woman. We can see that in the way you present your thinking. So perhaps you have a little conclusion you would like to share with us, and we are very happy to listen to you.
Okay, merci Jan and Angeline. Yes, Tanzania, as you are aware, it's an agriculture-driven economy as well. So far, 65% of the people in Tanzania are employed in the agriculture sector. So therefore, we understand its relevance. And this relevance has been reinforced by our president, His Excellency, Dr. Magufuli, who has already set the tone for the next 5 years following his parliament speech, where he emphasized agriculture and the need to revigorate agriculture. Subsequent to that speech, we've seen, like every day, if you look in the papers as you Google, you will see there's been a lot of running around by his ministers, prime ministers, to activate agriculture. So whether it's SISO, whether it's sunflower development, whether it's food or crops, we see a lot of intervention from a political level. The banks are also ready. A lot of them have already been called in to press on the agriculture agenda. As TADB, as a development bank owned by the government, we've already been in that space. It's only been 5 years, but we see that our relevance has created interest and impact on financing agriculture. We love to learn from the researchers, as from what we've heard today, and those in advocacy as well. So we do not exclude them from the conversation of agriculture development. Thank you.
Thank you, Coletta. Thank you very much. Who want to go next? Davis, you want to make a little last contribution, perhaps? Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. From my side is, after listening to the conversation, it's very clear, and it's one of the things we've been discussing, is that for sustainability, nature has to be taken into account, but nature cannot pay cannot put money in your pocket directly. So how do we encourage youth, women, and even farmers on large scale to acknowledge the contribution of nature that nature is making to their businesses? So in this case, we need to promote this idea and continue to discuss about it so that it's better understood by different groups. Secondly, post-harvest has been spoken about, but I would like to bring in the other aspect of food waste, which is the waste post the dining table. And the studies that UNEP has done has shown that a lot of food that is wasted post the dining table or post the supermarket shelf is actually sufficient for Africa. I take this African perspective. It's sufficient to feed the whole of the African population. This is sadly the case. So how do we address the issue of food waste? Not post-harvest loss, which is a major issue, and I do not dwell on that because it has been discussed, but just to look at the food waste question. And this leads me to the third issue that I would like to bring as a conclusion, that there is need for within Africa to have a regional cooperation, and between Africa and the other regions to have an interregional cooperation. The transformation and transition, an agricultural transition that is ecologically sound, cannot happen if it happens only within a locality or if it happens only within a country. It has to happen across the country, across the continent, and across the world. We need to talk to each other. We need to come together in an harmonized way. The fourth is private sector engagement. And I'm happy and glad that Angelina and Jan, you managed to get the private sector to be actively engaged. The UN will come up with policies and recommendations and studies and make experimental work to demonstrate that it is worth doing. The governments will make the policies, pass the laws that will facilitate the flow of finance and things like that. But the person who will take the finance and take the machinery and the hoe and put it to work is most likely to be motivated and accelerated through the private sector, even including the financing, including the marketing, including the processing. It's a big role that the private sector has a big part to play in ensuring agroecological sustainability. Last but not least, it was mentioned, I forgot by who, but in Nigeria, that floods are a problem to the sugarcane growing. I happen to have done a project down south, not down south, to the east of Nigeria. This is in Mali, on a system of lakes called Lake Fagubini. There are 5 lakes that are interconnected, and they depend on the flood water from the Niger River. And this just emphasizes what I've been saying about interregional and cross-border cooperation. Without the flood water getting to Lake Fagubini, the community around Lake Fagubini is literally starved. They cannot produce anything. They depend on recession agriculture. So the importance of having countries talking to each other within the continent, but also the continent talking to the other continents is important. I rest my case. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Larry. Very clear. Okay, I think, David, you share most of what I've been saying. Perhaps you have other point to address, and after we can give the floor to our friend from Nigeria. So I give the floor, David, to propose your conclusions and any remark you want to add.
Okay, let me just say this as my own closing remark. There is a huge potential across Africa to leapfrog on technology and innovation to scale agricultural production and therefore be able to feed its growing population. But we must make deliberate efforts to ensure that this happens. And I think the African Union presents a veritable platform through which we can achieve this. The African Union must necessarily begin to look at an all-inclusive strategy that brings governments together and regional and regions to integrate quickly so that we can achieve growth. Sarah, I hope I didn't miss the name, that left, mentioned the issues of fintech platforms that will enable trade across Africa. The issue is this. Now, even if I want to trade with somebody in Tanzania, for example, what do we use as a benchmark? We're either going to use the dollar or the euro. And that poses serious challenges. I'm here spending Naira, the man in Tanzania spends what? Is it shillings or what? Yes, spends shillings. And then there is no standard exchange. We have to take a benchmark from a currency that is completely outside Africa. And this poses a very huge challenge. So it brings a lot of disparities into play. And it makes this issue of remote connection very, very serious. Everybody that produces across Africa wants to sell. And the markets exist across the continent, but that connectivity is a major challenge. The Nigeria Agribusiness, of course, Agribusiness Group, of course, is working very closely with the AU, with the African Agribusiness Association, and we're going to push to see how this happens. But as I said, this platform also will do well to lend a voice to the AU headquarters on these issues. We have young, vigorous, innovative young men and women across the continent who are ready to go out there and slug it out. But the barrier, until you set out to play, that's when you begin to see the hurdles. And for those of us who are out there in the field playing, we see these things clearly and we see them on a daily basis. And these are issues that should not be discounted. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you very much. Okay, before ending, perhaps Mr. Olusegun, you can take the floor after after the doctor, and then we will close with David. Mr. Olusegun, please. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure being on this forum. I've learned a lot, especially about inter-African collaboration. I just want to reiterate, just like some of our people have already mentioned, that the real path to turning into reality in the African agro landscape is by motivating economic actors and investors in these businesses to be able to expand and be able to take the knowledge to those who actually need it in a large scale. You cannot give half. And it is important that we all remember that we all depend on each other. We do not want to work in silos as, you know, non-governmental organizations, development finance institutions, and also research institutions and private sector. We want to collaborate together, seeing this information that we have that needs to be, to be freely and easily accessible. By doing this, we are helping each other to be able to scale up on our activities. So I would strongly advocate that quite a lot of the terminologies and new innovations, new things that are happening in the agri space needs to be properly channeled and have an opportunity for people to have easy access to it, so that when they are trying to experiment it, it's very, very easy for them to do. I am saying that from the private sector participation, that we need this. We need the cooperation. We need an opportunity whereby this information are easily accessible and we know where it is so that we'll be able to access it. Quite a lot of job has been done. I learned a lot from Levis and a few others about what is being done in other clients. If I didn't enter into this forum, probably I would not learn half of what I've already learned today. So we need this kind of opportunity, and I think your organization also can take this together with what Dr. Manzo has said, so that at the press of a button, it's easy for us to be able to do so and ask questions and be able to get those questions. That way, when you have the knowledge, then taking them into the field and experimenting and making them a reality becomes something very, very easy for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So important. Yeah, it's definitely an area where joining force is not a waste of time. And from our perspective, anything we can bring as a platform or as a contributions will be definitely important. I think that Plug Talk of today is definitely opening so much wide area that need our concentrations. Thank you very much, Olusegun. Thank you very much. David, it's your role to close the floor. So very important charge. Please, following what you heard and your perspective, we are very happy to hear your last words on the discussions.
Thank you so much, Made in Africa, for the opportunity to be here. This is one of the platforms where private sector, finance, civil society have been brought together. It's a rare opportunity. I don't know where you got these two doctors to get to be on this platform, but it's always very difficult, even when we organize programs in Nigeria, to get the private sector, so Floyd Mills and Dr. Manzu, to be here. I'm quite impressed. I'm very happy. Now, coming from the climate change perspective, one thing that sustainable agriculture offers the world, I mean, sustainable agriculture in Africa offers the world, is nature-based solutions. We all know that Africa is responsible for less than 3% of greenhouse emissions, but we are very happy to be part of the solution. And what is the solution we are offering? Carbon sequestration through the soil, carbon sequestration with our forest. Africa has about 874 million hectares of arable land that can store carbon for the world. It's a big plus for the continent. But to do this, we must continue to enlighten and educate our people, especially the rural farmers. We need to build their capacity. It is only through education that the farmers will understand that food waste at tables ends up in the dump site and produces methane, which is one of the most potent greenhouse gases. So we need to educate our farmers. We need to build their capacity. And I would like to end by saying, I believe in commercial agriculture. I believe in empowering people. But profit making shouldn't be at the expense of the environment and poor people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Fantastic. You're totally right. And I think it's part of the answer of many things that have been said by all of you. You know, if we put more focus in impact in our economic model, and if we can value the impact, then perhaps the financial mechanism and part of what you've been saying also, Coletta, can be changed and offer opportunities. So leaders and important decision maker from institutions need to promote the impact and value the impact of agriculture to our environment. Thank you very much. It was great. As I told you, we have too much plug talk in preparation. We'll stay tuned. We'll get back to you to talk about that. I promised to one of our spectators to reintroduce myself because wasn't here at the beginning. So I'm Yann Conadier. I'm president of Practice Associates. We are co-founder of Made in Africa. Our company is working hardly to assist government, institutions, major industry to address transitions on the collective way, on the positive way, and because we think today that we should share the solutions together. We strongly believe at Made in Africa that the solution or major solutions are in Africa, but not only because of the resource of your continent, but you totally demonstrate that today because of your expertise and because of your leadership in managing those challenges. Congratulations to all. I pass the phone. I thank very much Angeline for organizing that today. I thank you, all of you, and I really look forward to catching up soon and all our best support in your amazing engagement and commitment. Thank you very much. And Angeline, please. Bye-bye all.
Thank you, everybody, for all your commitments, all your intervention. Thank you very much. So all of you, we will keep in touch for the forthcoming plug to come because it was the one dedicated to agricultural transition, but we are going to have two other ones scheduled in March and June. So we're going to keep in touch, okay? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.